Okay, so we're going to get started today with exercise 128. Happy Thanksgiving week, even though we don't get any time off. It's really depressing. My daughter has the whole week off, and somehow we're here. So whatever. It is what it is. So we do have class today, obviously, and we do have class on Wednesday. Okay. I am, however, because I want a little vacation too, I'm going to move my office hours, which are normally, not that it matters for you guys because you're not usually around, from after class to before class on Wednesday so that I can leave a little bit earlier than normal too. So my office hours on Wednesday will be from 7 to 8 in the morning, just like they are today, from 7 to 8. So anyway, just wanted you guys all to know that. Though, if you really have a burning question, I'm sure I'll still sit with you and answer your questions anyway. So today we're going to start talking about doing plans from Photoshop, or plans from SketchUp in Photoshop. And a lot of what we're doing today is a little bit redundant. You've already drawn the plan in AutoCAD. You've already collaged that plan in Illustrator. So you say, well, wait a minute, why do I want to now do the same plan in SketchUp? And the truth is that you probably wouldn't do it in this order anymore. You already have a nice plan in AutoCAD and or from Illustrator, so why would you go through the effort of creating a plan in SketchUp? You already have a nice one. If, however, you started modeling your building in SketchUp and didn't ever do the AutoCAD portion, creating a nice plan from your SketchUp file is not a bad strategy. Does that make sense? So for you guys right now, it's a little bit redundant because you already have a nice plan. But in the future, you may just be modeling in SketchUp to start and not have ever done the AutoCAD plan. So in this context, it might be really useful, which is why I'm showing it to you. So the purpose is to actually create a brand new plan that is based on your SketchUp model rather than the AutoCAD plan that you started with. So I know it's a little bit full circle, but long term, this is a skill that's useful to you. I do the same thing in the 136 class with Rhino. We spend several days going through creating plans and sections and elevations so that if you spend a lot of time creating a nice high-quality 3D model, you can use it. So of course you can use it for the perspective views, but what about for these other types of views? So today we're going to go through and do a plan. And I'm going to do it slightly different than I did the last time. I'm not going to do as much photo collage. I'm going to do a little bit more abstract in the style to show you that styles can vary. And you're gonna see that it's going to look a little bit different. I'm going to emphasize a little bit more grunge texture today. But we'll get to the same place, and you'll still have a plan. So I've opened up my SketchUp file, and I have it ready to do some modeling here. First thing that I want to do is I want to start thinking of this as a plan. So when I think of a plan, obviously I'm looking down on the building. I'm looking inside the building. But plans are actually not at floor level. They're a little bit higher. Does anybody know how high a plan is typically cut?
4 feet.
4 feet. Why is it cut at 4 feet? Nice. Nice job, right? 4 feet is a sweet spot. It's in all likelihood going to cut through all the windows, or most of the windows. It's going to cut through all of the doors. It's going to be above the kitchen countertops, so you can see the kitchen countertops and the lower cabinets. It's also going to be below the upper cabinets, so you're not cutting through those. So it's kind of a nice sweet spot. So we always cut the floor plan at 4 feet above floor level. So I'm going to use the section tool in SketchUp to actually cut this floor plan so we can see what the building looks like. If I were to switch myself over into a top view, for example, and look down on my building, and I know this is still in perspective right now, if I was looking down on my building, we'd see the roof. And I want to see this so that it's open so I could see all the walls that I've cut through. So let me flip myself back around here. There we go. Now, the section plane tool in SketchUp, if you don't see it, you might have to view the large tool set, which is available under View, Toolbars, and make sure you check the large tool set option here. That's the one that goes down the side. The last bottom right corner is the section plane tool. And what the section plane tool does is it allows us to basically cut a section. So for example, I could cut a section through my building there. Now, I'd like to be a little bit more precise about how I cut that section to begin with. So I'd like to create a guide object. So first off, I know if I just create a little square here, I can use the push-pull tool, and I can make it match the height of my floor. So that's now the same height as my floor. But I know I want it 4 feet above that. So at this point, if I go up another 4 feet from where I was, now I'm at that 4 feet above floor level. Does that make sense? So I'm using this little piece as a guide object to set the height correctly. Now that I have that, I'll go back to the section tool, or the section plane tool. And the section plane tool needs to be in the blue direction for the section that we're cutting right now. Essentially, a plan is just a section, but it's looking down instead of to the side. So there I am. I want to make sure I'm on top of this, this little cube guide object here. And when I click, it's now going to cut my building right through at the 4-foot high option, which is exactly what I want for my floor plan. So there it is, and I'm reasonably happy with it. I can go ahead and delete this object now, right there, because it doesn't do anything for me. Now that I've gotten my section at the right height, we're good to go. Okay? So the next piece of this is I need to start setting this up as if I'm looking down on the object. And so I could switch. For example, I could move my house around and get it looking. But this is just like the elevation views where it's a one-point perspective. All the lines are receding at the corners down. So I don't want this. I want to be looking as if it was straight down. So I need to switch my view. So I'll go into Camera, Standard Views, and I'm going to go to the top view so that I'm looking straight down on my object. But I'm also going to switch from perspective to parallel projection, which is exactly what we did with the elevation view. So I'll switch to parallel projection, and now I'm looking straight down at my building. I make a reference on your handout to a plugin that's called the Section Cut Face. If you have SketchUp on your own computer, you might want to explore this as an option. Essentially what it does is it fills in all of the walls with a surface, which is really convenient. But for whatever reason, they don't seem to be able to install it on these computers and keep it on these computers. So I've given up trying to make them do it. So it's just a plugin. It's free, and it can really help down the road. Did I make the windows in this one? I have some of the windows. I haven't completely finished the model. So no, they're actual. They're windows. See, there's the surfaces that cut in, cut out, etc. If I were to switch down, let's see. You can see that I did little extrusions to represent the windows there. There is a plane here, but I've made it glass in one of the views. I assigned a glass material to it. It doesn't matter for what we're doing whether it's transparent or not. Anyway, let me go back into my sorry, I thought I had a floor plan view. See, now you got me all screwed up, right? All right, all right. All right. Well, you guys get to watch me do this again. There's my little helper object. Push-pull to match to the floor. And then we're going up 4 more feet. Type 4 feet. We're going to use the section tool, look straight down, and cut a section through the building like that. We're going to switch our view into the top. I'll go to Camera, Standard Views, Top. And I'm going to make sure that I'm in parallel projection, which I am. I can also delete this object here. Oops. It doesn't matter. We'll get rid of that in Photoshop later. OK, so I'm going to do a couple things as I start to set up this view. Number one, I want to make sure that I can save this view so that I can come back and return to it later on. So I'll go into my scenes, which is right here. And I'm going to save this. And you can tell I've done this a few times. We'll call this floor plan. Oh, wait. Let me create a new one. Sorry. New one. Create scene. Floor plan 4. There we go. So now I have my floor plan 4 showing. I don't know whether you guys can see this on the projector, but you'll notice it on your view. When you have the section cut, there's a very light gray plane that represents the section. And if I go to the View menu and I turn off Section Plane, see how it brightens up just a little bit? You want to make sure that that section plane stays off. It has a tendency to come back on, and when we do the blending mode, a multiply blending mode, it'll darken the background, and you don't want that to happen. So I'll make sure that's off. Let me go ahead and turn off my shadows as well. Let me turn off my axes and my guides. And I'm going to leave section cuts on because I want to actually see where I've cut through the building. So once I have this view set up the way that I want it, I'm going to go ahead and go to File, Export 2D Graphic. And this is going to be my lines view. Let me change where I'm going to save this here. And this is and I'll go ahead and check my options first. Okay, 5,000 on one direction, that seems pretty good. And we'll go ahead and export that. So now I get this view that represents my building. And actually, I could probably get rid of this. There we go. So the next piece is I'm going to turn on the shadows. So I'll go to View, and then I'll turn on shadows. Now notice when I do that, though, it's casting a shadow, but the shadow is as if the building's clipped. So this isn't really that accurate. It doesn't help me with my shadows much. So I'm going to go ahead and instead of showing the cut, I'm going to go to View, and I'm going to turn off section cuts, which is going to give me the roof line of my building, which when I have overhangs, I'm going to have to do some finesse work in Photoshop. But essentially, this is going to give me the whole shadow that's being cast by the building. I can also go in and adjust the time of day and or the time of year until I get the happy medium of what I want for my shadow, which direction, etc. So something like that might be kind of a nice shadow. I get a little interaction there. I'm reasonably happy. So a couple things, though, that I want to do. I want to try to turn off the building so that I have just the shadows showing, like I did before. So I'll go into my Styles. I'm going to go to Edit, and I'm going to turn off my edges so that I end up with just the shadows. Then I'll go ahead and go to File, and then Export 2D Graphic. And I'll call this one Shadows. And I'll export. There we go. I'll turn back on my edges. I'm going to go to View, and I'm going to turn back on section cuts so that I'm cut through my building, and I'll turn off my shadows. Then I'm going to go into my styles, and I'm going to try some of the other styles. So the airbrush with endpoints, for example, I might try that. Notice that when I picked the airbrush with endpoints, the background turned that slight gray color. I have to go back into the View menu and turn off the section plane to get it back to white. It's just something that you have to keep in mind when you're doing these. I'll go ahead and go to File and then Export 2D Graphic. And this is airbrush. I'll export. I might turn on my pen gray if I can find it. There it is. Once again, go back, turn off that section plane, and then export again. Export 2D graphic. Now, I didn't do an X-ray view on the export because we're already kind of in section. So it doesn't make sense to do the X-ray view. So I'm not going to worry about that one. And I'll export that as well. So I have this as a saved view, so I can always come back to it if I feel like I need some other view as part of this work. OK, so once that's done, I'm going to switch over into Photoshop. And just like we did last class, I'm going to start to bring those pieces together. So the first one I'll do is go to File and then Open, and I'll open up that lines drawing, which was the first export that I made. There's the lines version. There it is. Looks like I didn't delete that little piece, so I probably should fix that. Let me right-click and say Layer from Background. And I'm just going to paint over it with white so that that goes away. OK, next I'll bring in, so I'll go to File and then Place. And I'm going to bring in each of the other views. So we'll start with the shadows here. There it is. Because I didn't move my view, they line up perfectly, which is what I want. I'll go to File and then Place and bring in my pen. I'll go to File and then Place, and I'll bring in my airbrush. And again, I'm not sure that I'm going to use those styles, but I bring them in anyway. So let me do a few things to rename my layers, just for clarity. This is lines. This is shadows. This is pen. And this is airbrush. Remember, layer organization is always a good thing. So renaming your layers will help you later on. I'm going to take the top three here. I'll hold down Shift to select all of them at once. And I'll switch all of them to be multiply so that we can see through all three of them. Let me go ahead and turn back off the airbrush and the pen gray. And now I want to look carefully at this shadow for a second. So let me zoom in here a little bit. So remember, when I cut the shadow as if it was the whole building. So the shadow realistically would be inside of this little wall. It would be inside of this little wall. We'd get a stripe that goes diagonally through this little entrance there. This shadow here wouldn't exist, and this shadow would come over and connect to the building. So there's some complications with the shadows. I've got the bulk of the shadows, but I need to do some adjustments and some corrections. So let's start first by, I'll use my eyedropper tool here, and making sure that I'm on the shadows layer, I'm going to get the darker color shadow, I hope. And then I'll go ahead and I'll use my rectangular marquee, and I'm going to fill in right there. And this may take, I might have to do a polygonal lasso to get a little bit more here. I'm holding down Shift as I do this. Now, because it's a multiply, I can be a little bit generous as I make these selections. So even if I go over into the black a little bit, the black's darker than the gray, so it's going to end up being OK. I'm going to right-click on the shadows layer and say rasterize layer. That's to embed the version, the placed file into my file so that I can actually work on it. If I didn't do that, when I went to paint on the file here, it would give me that little say, no, I can't do it, because it's a placed object. If I right-click and say rasterize layer, however, I can paint on it. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and paint in. I already got my color to match, so it should be seamless when I paint that in, which is the idea. So let me come over here and start to check for other pieces. Let's see. OK, so here, this piece needs to be deleted. So I'll take from here all the way up to right there, and I'll go ahead and delete that, because that's not correct. I have a few pieces that need to be filled in right along this wall. So we'll add to the selection. I'm holding down Shift right now as I do this. Like that. And I'll go ahead and paint. Oh, my colors weren't a match. So let me go back to my eyedropper, pick this color, and then paint. There we go. Now they're a match, the way they should be. All right, so those are done. Now this one is a diagonal that goes here out to there. So what I'll do is I'll use my polygonal lasso tool right here. I'll start along this line, and I'll continue on the same angle until it reaches the building. So it's about like that. Then I'll come over. And I'll come all the way down here till they intersect. Perfect. And then I'll go ahead and paint this one in. So I'll use my eyedropper to make sure I have the same gray. I'll come back to the paintbrush and I'll fill that in as well. So I've essentially reconstructed the shadow right there. Don't have to worry about anything on this side. We do have to worry a little bit right down in here. So let me zoom in. Control plus to zoom in. And just like I did before, I'll use the polygonal lasso and I'll follow this line right down till it meets. So we'll go like that, like that. I'm going to hold down Shift to select this part. And this one, I'm going to follow right down until it meets, which is probably right there. Perfect. And then I'll fill this whole section in. Like that. This shadow will come over and intersect it here. So I'll hold down Shift, and I'll add that piece to the selection as well. So there it is. Now I need to fill this in. So I'll use my paintbrush. I'll use my eyedropper first to select the same color. Then we'll paintbrush in all of that, paintbrush in that piece. And so now you can see that that piece has the shadow on it as well. So you kind of have to go through and reconstruct things. Looks like over here I'm OK. All of that's fine. So I'm reasonably happy with the shadows at this point. I'm getting the shadows that I want. Actually, well, there is one more shadow that I'm missing. This wall would cast a shadow on the same angle back here. So I'll start right there. Oops. Oops, my mistake. This has to be on the same angle as that. So we'll come back until it's about the same angle. That looks about right to me. There it is. I'll use the eyedropper to select that color, and then I'll paintbrush in that part of the shadow as well. Press Control 0, and now we can see the whole building with its shadows complete. So you have to do a little bit of work to get those to fall correctly. But after you do a little bit of work, now we have some nice shadows that are falling correctly. So at this point, I may find that I want to fill in all the walls so that they show up a little bit better. And again, this is a personal preference. Do you want to do it or not? So I will create a brand new layer. And I'm going to call this layer Wall Fill. With that layer selected, I'm going to use my magic wand. Actually, I'm going to make the lines layer selected. I'll use my magic wand. And for clarity, I'll turn off the shadows. And I'm going to select inside of all the walls. And you can see that there's some mistakes. I'm missing a few doors and that sort of thing. But essentially, I'll go through and I'll pick the walls like that. And now I can go ahead and fill in those walls with a gray or a black or whatever. I'm going to go ahead and use black for right now. Remember, I can do an adjustment layer and change that into a different color afterward. So I'll go ahead and I'll paint in black along these walls. There we go. And now I have that starting to show up as a little bit more like a floor plan. So you see the cycle back to what AutoCAD looked like. OK, so now I have that one set up. And I have my wall fill. Oops, looks like I missed a little bit. Didn't quite get all of that shape. What? Sorry, I accidentally selected the outside instead of the inside. There we go. There we go. Okay, so let me press Control 0 to see everything. Now we're seeing the plan. We already have the shadows, which can go on and off. Now it's time to bring in those collage elements. And like I said, this time I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I'm going to emphasize a grunge texture rather than a truly photorealistic background. I've done it where I've done the photorealistic. The problem with that is you need a picture of the ground or a picture of the site that's from the right height. And if you're in any kind of a forested environment, getting that right height, you're either too tall because it's from a plane or a satellite, or you're too close to the ground. The happy medium would be a kite aerial photograph, a photograph from a kite. That's about what you want. But people don't fly kites in the forest because of obvious reasons. The strings would get tangled in the trees and that sort of thing. So you're limited to, if you had a beach setting, then you could probably get a kite photograph that would work nicely for the background. But for our purposes here, it just doesn't quite work. So I'm going to go ahead and get a grunge texture. Remember, you can do a Creative Commons search for grunge texture. To find one. I happen to have a bunch that I've already downloaded, but I'm just reminding you that you can get to them here. So I'm going to go ahead and go to File and then Place, and I'm going to bring in one of those grunge textures. So on my flash drive or on my OneDrive here, I have resources, and then I have something called grunge textures, which will allow me to go through and pick from these various grunge textures. I want one that's kind of interesting. No, that doesn't like that one. Let me try it again with a different one. I'll try this one. And if you bring it in and you don't like it, don't be afraid to change it. So I'll make that one a little bit bigger. It's not quite as high quality as I want. Let me try one more. Try this one. Yeah, that one could be interesting. And I'll commit to it. There we go. So I have this one in place. Obviously, I can't see my building. So I'm going to, with the lines layer selected, use my magic wand to select the outside of my building. And I want to make sure that any raised patios or something that's not included in this selection. And for me, I didn't ever draw the stairs, so I'm going to deselect a little bit more. I'll use the rectangular marquee to do this. I'll hold down Shift, or excuse me, it's Control Alt. It's Alt, there we go, to subtract from the selection where the stairs would be, like that. Let me press Control 0. Now that I have that set up, I can move back to my grunge texture here, and I can click on the Add Layer Mask. And now this is cut out for my layer mask. The color is probably a little bit too much right now, so we'll convert that into black and white. I'll do an adjustment layer, so Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and we'll do a channel mixer. And the channel mixer, I'm going to turn it to monochrome. And then, of course, I'd go through my presets and decide which one looks best. And so far, I'm not liking any of them. Yeah, that one's pretty good. I just made it a little bit more subtle there. Remember, I want this to only apply to that layer. So I'm going to tie these layers together by pressing Control-Alt-G so that I get that little arrow. Now that's tied together as part of the layer. So this is certainly fine. And if I were to turn on my shadows and or my wall fill, this layer here should be a little bit lower in the layer stack. Let me put that below everything else. There we go. Now we're getting the shadows on top of the layer. Okay, so that's good. That's reasonable. But I'd kind of like to make this less rigid. So remember we talked about last class, sometimes on a presentation board you have a square and everything is filled in with color. Sometimes you want your plan or your elevation to kind of be able to float in with the other objects. So instead of making this quite so sharp, I'm going to bring in an ink splatter as part of my masking of this particular layer. So let me show you what I mean. If we do a image search for ink splatter, maybe not. I cannot type this morning. I'm looking for something along these lines, okay, where I have these little, almost like a watercolor droplet. I happen to have some already downloaded on my flash drive, but any one of these could work as well. Something like this one might work. You want to think about the size of the image, but also where your plan would go in relation to this splat, for example. So that one might not have enough space. Something like this one, if I made it a lot larger, might work nicely. Like I said, I already have a few, so I'll use one of the ones that I've already downloaded. And these are the kinds of things that you end up saving over time, so you'll reuse the same ones. I'll go to File and then Place, and I'm going to bring one of those in. So I have it listed. Sorry, I have to think where I have this. Ink splotches, there we go. So I have a variety of different ones that are available here. Something like this might be good. Oh, how nice, thanks. Oh, the scratch disks are full, how nice. So my computer's conveniently run out of space. Gotta love it. So let me try to save this and see if that'll free up any space. How nice, right? Okay, how am I going to do the rest of this? Always interesting. I wonder if I can open it. Nope, won't let me do that either. Okay, so give me a second to see if I can clear out some space on the computer, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so bear with me for just a second. Okay, so I'm gonna continue on. I was able to place in an image that I found on Flickr. I don't know why mine wouldn't work. The computer's probably going to crash out on me shortly, but I'm trying. Anyway, so I placed in this image, which I want to use as part of this whole mask. So let me turn off a few things just so you can see it. When I was setting this up, I was paying attention to where the building would fall in relation to where the ink was, because you want to compose this just like you would any other drawing. So I want to make sure that I have an understanding of where it is, where the texture is going to show, and that sort of thing as well. So what I ultimately want to do is I want to use this as a mask to control where the grunge texture is showing through and where it's not. So the things that are white have less grunge showing through than the things that are, in this case, blue. So I'm going to go ahead and start by rasterizing this layer so that it ends up being something that I can work with. And then I want to end up converting this over into a mask somehow. So the first thing that I'll do is let me turn everything off so that I'm working just with this particular object. So first thing I need to do is convert this into a black and white object. So I'd go to Layer, Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Channel Mixer. Say OK. I'm going to turn this into monochrome. There it is. It looks reasonably good. I will Control-Alt-G to tie this to that. Now, I actually want to make this a permanent change. So let me go ahead and merge layers. So I've selected both of them. I've merged them together. So this one is now officially black and white. Okay, I'm not going to go back and make an adjustment later on. The next piece, though, is I want to be able to take this image and use this image as the mask on this background object. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky. And this is, obviously, we're getting to the advanced side of Photoshop. So I'm going to throw a few of these at you, not necessarily that you're all going to get it, but it's there, should you want to. So I'm going to take this image right here. I'm on this layer. I'm going to copy it. I'll go to Edit and then Copy. Then I'm going to move down to this mask here. And it would be nice if I could just paste it in there. But it doesn't work that way. I have to actually go over to this Channels layer. And I'm going to turn on the mask right there. And with this mask selected, I will then go to Paste, which is going to paste in that piece into the mask. I will end up, when I switch back to layers, you'll see that that mask now is applied. Okay, so there's the mask on this background texture layer. So when that turns on, you can see the ink that's coming through as part of that. You may find that this mask isn't doing what you want it to. If you right-click and say, sorry, with it selected, if you go up to Image, and then, why am I not seeing it? Adjustments, Invert. You may see it a little bit better. This is really faint for you guys. So I may need to go back to my original one. I'll go back to my channel mixer here. I want to increase the contrast in this. So I'll go into Layer, New Adjustment Layer. I'll do Levels. Let's see if I can darken this. Sorry, it's got to be up here. There we go. Control-Alt-G to tie those two together. And I want to push the darkness of this a lot more than it currently is. So I get a lot more black to white as part of it. Something like that might be good. I'll combine these two together. Let me select them both, right-click, and say Merge Layers. Then I'll copy this again, Control-A for all, Control-C to copy. And I'm going to move back to this layer. Click on the mask, go to my channels, go to this, and I'll go to Edit and then Paste. There we go. We may find that I need to invert this. Let me go into Image, Adjustments, Invert. There we go. I also might find that I need to do a little bit of work to touch up and to clean up these corners because I've lost a little bit in the corners as part of it. But let me go back and show you what's happened. So if we go back to my layer here, you can see that I'm starting to get the grunge texture in the ink part. Okay, I know it's a little bit light. I may have to duplicate these as part of it. I need to cut out, though, where the building would be. So let me turn back on my building. I'll use my magic wand on the lines layer to select everything. Except for that and that. There we go. And on this mask, I'm going to go ahead and press the Delete key. Sorry. Never mind. I have to paint it because I can't. So let me invert my selection. So I'll go to Select and then Inverse, and I will paint with black so that my plan shows through. Let me make that brush a little bit bigger. We don't need to take too long to do it. There you go. I'm trying to make that shine through a little bit more against it. It looks so much better on my screen than it does up there. Let me convert this whole thing to black and white. There we go. So it's not quite so strong. And then let me go ahead and turn on things like my shadows so that we can see that in contrast, and my wall fill so that we can start to see this as its background. The shadows seem a little bit strong. Let me adjust those down so that they're not quite so strong. Something like that. Perfect. How did I miss filling that piece in? You guys didn't tell me I missed part of the shadows here. I thought I did too, but oh well. Doesn't appear to like my color here. Yeah, it's picking. There we go. All right, sorry about that. So let's turn back on. Like that. I'll press Control 0, and now we can see that in context with the background. So it's made the background a little bit more interesting as part of this. Now, I may find that I want to add a little bit more to this. Maybe I want to add a tree, for example. It might be time to put that in. So I will load up some kind of a tree. You could do a Creative Commons search or even a Google image search for plan tree. And I'm looking for something like this, for example. So let me go ahead and save this image. Save image as. There it is. Now I can drop that tree in. I'll go to File and then Place. I'll drop the tree in. Tree probably needs to be a little bit bigger, but I also need to pay attention to where the shadows are on the tree as well. So the darker side of the tree is here, the lighter side of the tree is there. So we'll flip this tree around so that the darker side is in line with the direction of my shadows. Does that make sense? So those are the little details that'll get you a lot further when you do these. Now, I also need to cast the shadow of the tree itself. So let me go ahead, I'll place that, committing to it. Now I need to find a tree silhouette. So I'll do pine tree silhouette. Let me do search. That one looks pretty good. It's got background on it. I could, of course, make my own as well. You know what? I need to go back to Creative Commons. Do it as a Google image search. There you go. That'll work. So there's the silhouette. Let me right-click and say Save Image As, and I'll put it in my same folder here. I'll go to File and then Place, and I'll drop that tree in. This is ultimately going to be my shadow. I need to change. I'll get back to changing size here. I'm going to change it to a multiply so that it becomes transparent. I then need to go back to Edit and then Free Transform, because this obviously has to get smaller. And one of the rules of thumb, obviously, the tree width here should match. So that can help me get it to the right size. The direction here, the shadow needs to be along the same line as my building shadow. So we'll make some adjustments here. There we go. The trunk should be at the center, obviously. Something about like that. So I'm getting that set up so that it's right. Now, it's definitely too dark in compared to the contrast here. So I could right-click and say rasterize layer. And on this layer, I could do a select color range of black. Actually, let me turn off everything else so that nothing else is in the way. Select color range of black. There it is. And I could paint that with the color of my shadow. So let me turn back on my shadows. I will get this color, and then I will paint the tree to match the color of the shadow. Do you guys see how I'm trying to make those match? I could also do it visually instead by doing an adjustment layer on it. So let me go back a couple steps just to show you that. Instead, I could also do it as an adjustment layer. So let me go into my layer, new adjustment layer, levels. There it is. Control-Alt-G to tie that directly there. And then I should be able to swing, sorry, it's this value, to whatever the gray color would be. So this one would have to be visual, and I'm looking for it to match up with this. Let me turn back on the base of the tree, like that. Now, as I look at the base of this tree, this part wouldn't be shown. So I need to go in, and I can be on the shadow, and I'll just use the eraser, and I'll erase out that part of the shadow because it wouldn't be shown. Something like that. So now I've created the tree with the shadow. This tree probably doesn't belong in the bright color. I don't have any color in this drawing, so I probably need, on the tree, I need a channel mixer. So let me go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Channel Mixer, Control-Alt-G. We're going to turn it to monochrome. There we go. So it's not standing out. Now we can turn stuff back on. Let me turn back on my background and my lines. You can see that there's the tree in that context. We could turn on my airbrush, my wall fill, and now we can zoom out, Control-0, and we can see the whole thing as part of the collage. Okay, so this is a different strategy for how you're getting there. I unfortunately, because of the ink splot that I ended up using, it's not as sharp white as I would have liked. I couldn't load the one that I wanted, which is a nice black and white contrast. That would make this far sharper, and I wouldn't have these weird diagonals. If I can get it to load, I'll switch it out so you guys can see the version with the sharper background. It looks a little bit better. So this is essentially what you're going after today. You're creating a floor plan. This now looks like a very reasonable floor plan, even though it came from SketchUp. So this could pass on an architectural presentation just like an AutoCAD drawing could pass. So you're able to get something like this out of SketchUp rather than having to do the AutoCAD drawing, which is obviously my goal. Okay, so I apologize for the computer glitches and the issues along the way. Like I said, if I can get it to load with the other ink splot, you guys, I'll show you that image so you can see what it was supposed to look like. Any questions? No? All right.